Hello? Stephen?
Hi, is that Harvey?
Hi, how you doing?
Hey, Harvey, how's it going? So
I'm good.
my iPhone is not letting me do the Zoom thing because I've run out of data because I've been on too many of these damn things. So I have to dial in on the phone.
Whatever.
So, I mean, so I don't get to participate in the chat and see who's on the phone. But I'm scared shitless about this situation because, I mean, I was reading, there was a really good piece in the New York Times magazine a week ago.
Yeah, it was a good piece.
Yeah, Emily Bazelon. Did you see that?
Right. Well, they wouldn't give us the time of fucking day from 2000 to 2016, but suddenly they got religion.
Yeah, but one of the things that really struck me is the fact that they're not the places that print ballots are not prepared, don't have the capacity to print all these mail ballots.
Right.
And people are competing with one another, just like the fucking testing. States are competing against each other for a limited supply source.
Well, print them in China.
Yeah, right. Print them in China, where they're very used to conducting presidential elections, right?
Apparently.
Oh my God! I was just talking to my sister in New York City, and she was saying that she has a Republican quote friend who says that the day after the election, the virus will suddenly not be around because it's all been a hoax all along. There are actually people who believe that shit.
Yeah.
And then you have this idiot in the White House actually saying in response, I don't know if you saw that, to Phil Rucker of the Washington Post, he says, Rucker asked him, what is the crime you're asserting that Obama committed? And he said, you know what the crime is. It's Obamagate. He said, well,
That's a talking point. That's a talking point that came out of, there's a whole bunch of very highly paid rat fuckers who came up with that idea. It's a brilliant
Obamagate.
It's a brilliant strategy.
I don't know what they...
It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to exist. It's a diversion.
Well, right. But the question is how many people are going to... I mean, I'm really concerned about Virginia because, there was another big problem. The DMV's closing. That's the major way a lot of people register to vote.
Right.
Students aren't on campus. There's no live voter registration drives. We need to have people registered so that they can vote. If they're not registered, obviously they can't vote. So how do we solve that problem?
Right.
In Virginia, when they first put in online voter registration in 2016 presidential election, the system crashed because too many people were simultaneously using it.
Yeah.
How are you going to count the ballots? Are they prepared, nationally to count the volume that they're anticipating?
So
no, they're not.
We need 10 million people who are going to be election protection monitors. You have to need 10 million people. That's what's going to take.
Yeah, but the question is, all right, so in Fairfax County, which is the largest jurisdiction in Virginia, They have a central absentee precinct, and it's packed full of people. Well, if the pandemic is still going on, they can't have these rooms packed full of people. First of all, the election officers aren't going to show up. They're not going to, they're all older people, right?
They'll have to hire an arena.
Well, whatever, we'll see. We'll see. This is, so who's that?
What's that?
Got on.
People are joining in. Hi, Marta. Hi, Bill. Bill Lacroix, are you prepared to talk about Montana? Can't hear you. You got me unmuted.
Harvey, your video is not on.
I don't want to take people's time. I'm not sure how helpful I'm gonna be until I.
Okay, we can skip it. We can wait.
Yeah, well, thank you for letting me be on.
There's that moose.
Where are you out in Montana, Bill? Where in Montana?
Western Montana, Victor. South of Missoula.
Okay, yeah, you know Anthony Johnstone? He's a professor at University of Montana in Missoula.
Gosh, I don't know the name.
He was the guy, I think it's his grandfather was the author of the No Corporate Contributions Permitted 100 years ago that got overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court after Citizens United.
Okay.
He wrote the amicus brief for the state of Montana. He's a professor at University of Montana.
I'll check them out.
Yeah, they had a after Citizens United in 2010, the Montana Supreme Court had just affirmed the Montana law, which had been in existence for 100 years, that said corporations couldn't give money to politicians.
I remember that.
And the U.S. Court just issued just a dismissive decision, said, see Citizens United, you can't do that. You can't restrict them.
Yeah. Well, Montana. That was during Jeanette Rankin's time 100 years ago. Just interesting.
Yeah. So is Bullock going to win?
I hope so. I've been trying to study up on him. He's a good guy. He's doing, mediocre things here. They're reopening and things aren't as good as I'd like.
Right.
What can you say? He's a good enough guy. I hope he wins.
So I hope, there's enough seats so that Mitch McConnell is no longer majority leader.
Well, he could lose, he could lose in Kentucky.
Yeah, he could lose. He could lose if we collectively solve all these problems, Harvey.
You have a Democratic governor in Kentucky. He's actually quite good.
Yeah, but McConnell's doing everything possible to minimize the amount of federal funds to assist the states.
Well, that's something we got to get over. I mean, we have 5 months. We don't. There are no surprises here. We know exactly what the game plan is. So that's what these calls are about. And we've got a track record dating to 2000 with zero help from the Democrats, which I assume we'll get again this year. And that's what we're trying to do here. So we've dealt with.
So Harvey, how's your printing press for money to buy all of these printing of ballots? The millions of absentee ballots that will have to be printed that the various jurisdictions can't afford to pay for.
Somebody's going to have to solve that problem. And, it could be Tom Steyer. It could be Michael Bloomberg. It could be Bill Gates.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
These
You're good friends with both.
The Democratic
You're good friends with both of them, right?
Yeah. But the word is out. The point is, we'll start officially at 2:05. It's 2:02 now, so we can chat for the moment. The word is out. You're getting coverage in the New York Times and in other media that we couldn't get 20 years ago. So somehow.
Oh, no, that's absolutely true. And I think
People have
that
woken up. So now we got to deal with this.
yeah. Well,
Okay, so let's see who we got. We got 35 participants already. And we do have an agenda. Paul, did you get that one thing about the Klobuchar bill that I sent you to post?
Yeah,
Okay, can you put that in the chat?
sure.
One of the things we're gonna talk about this week is the Klobuchar bill. And
you're going to have Andrea on, right?
Andrea is on. Andrea, do you
Hey,
wanna
Andrea.
unmute
Andrea,
yourself?
Stephen, how are you?
Who else we got?
Andrea,
we
say
have,
hello.
Hey, Stephen.
Hi, Andrea.
How you
Let's
doing?
see what you're looking like today.
Hello.
Steve Rosenfeld is on. Steve, I'm told you have a new article on vote by mail. Is it out yet?
No, it's, we're waiting for it to get finished. But
Okay, no problem. Okay, we're getting there. We're up to 40. Let's give it another minute or two. We have a pretty clear and packed agenda. Andrea, a lot of it's going to be you, so I
All right.
hope.
My PowerPoint is ready. I'm ready.
Okay. All right, good. How do I get hair like that? I mean, God, mine's turned snow white.
That would be hair dye.
Well, what I really should dye is my clothes, but you know, what can I say?
Oh, I'm loving that green wall there. That is a beauty.
Isn't that nice? Yeah, it is
Yeah,
nice.
it is. It
My
is.
wife has great
Outdoor,
taste.
indoors.
Okay, all right, we're rolling. Dorothy Reich is on. How you doing, Dorothy? Hi, Emily. Falabi from Greenpeace.
Hey, Falabi.
Hi,
Hey, Emily.
Hi,
Hi, Andrea.
Jennifer Roberts is with us. Hi, Jennifer. Mark Carlin, good. Mark Estrin. Mimi Kennedy is on. Hi, Mimi. Steve Spitz, Tim White, everybody. Emmett. Okay. I don't see Bob Fatrakis on. Bob, are you on? John Brakey, good. Better email Bob, or I'm going to call Bob right now, remind him of the call, and then we'll go.
Yeah.
Who else? Anybody look at the participant list. If there's somebody you think we need on that that's not on, call them. We can do that.
Hello, this is Tisa Rodriguez from the Riverside County
Oh, hi,
Democratic Party.
Tisa.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm fantastic. I have a couple of people that will not be able to be on today, but they definitely want to be included for the next couple of things. Really.
Okay,
really
well,
good
this is
activists.
every Monday at 5, we're going to do it
Okay,
for the
so
duration.
I'll
So
make sure that you have those names, definitely.
please.
Question,
Bob?
you're going to do it, next Monday is Memorial Day. It's a federal holiday, so I don't know if you're going to do it Monday or Tuesday. Next
Oh,
week. Just,
well, I'll ask and see what people want to do. Bob, it's Harvey. We're on the conference call. You got to get on, please. Okay, I hate to start without you, but we may have to. Okay. Okay, I don't have Joel's. Is Joel Siegel on?
yeah, he's on. He's there.
Okay. All right, let's rock and roll. We have an agenda that went out. I'll go over it real quick. We're going to do 90 action-packed minutes. We have the great Andrea Miller going to talk about voter protection. Mimi, I wanted you to tell that one story, if you can, about about the Republicans going in there and de-legitimizing ballots during the ballot count, because that's key. We're starting to get coverage on that. But let me run through the agenda real quick. I'll call Mimi real quick because I know she usually has to go. And then we'll rock and roll here with Andrea. So we're going to review what we've done with vote by mail. I have the document. I sent it around. If you haven't seen it and you want to see it, email me, and then I'll put it out tomorrow. I'll probably turn it into an article and publish it at a website. Solartopia@gmail is my email. And like I say, if you want to see the final product on the product to date on vote by mail, then email me, please. And like I say, it'll go out in the next day or two. The Klobuchar bill. We talked about the Klobuchar bill last time. I want to read you a summary. It should be in the chat. Klobuchar-Wyden. The bill called the Natural Disaster and Emergency Ballot Act, NDEBA, seeks to provide 20 days of early voting for all states. We like that. A guarantee that all voters can request to vote with a no excuse absentee ballot. We like that. It's being fought in Texas and elsewhere. Oh, by the way, this call is being recorded and may go out on radio. So just for your, so we don't use the 7 words of George Carlin. But you can curse in Yiddish if you want. Okay, or Jamaican, for God's sakes, whatever. There is as I say, guarantee that all voters can request to vote with a no excuse absentee ballot. As we know, many states require some kind of written permission from your mother that you're out of state or something like that and are entitled to an absentee ballot. So what this bill does is it makes everybody eligible for a vote by mail ballot. We won't call them absentee anymore. And Texas is fighting that, as I assume are a number of other states. Okay, Andrea says only 29 states have true no excuse. So we've got to get that made nationwide. Accommodations for voters who don't receive an absentee ballot in time, and additional funding for the Election Assistance Commission to make the changes. And as we've discussed, the Brennan Center has estimated $4 billion needed to do a national vote by mail exercise. But you know, we need to subtract from that $4 billion what it's going to cost anyway. The question is, how much extra will it cost to do a national vote by mail ballot? I want to hand it again to John Brakey for the best, most imaginative background. Thank you, John. So, you know, these are but this is the Klobuchar bill. It'll get out of the House, and Mitch McConnell will kill it in the Senate. It is astounding to me, as a historian, how McConnell has kept the senators 100%. I mean, the only dissident vote I think any Republican senator has cast in the last 4 years is when the guy from Utah, Mitt Romney, voted yes on 1 count of impeachment, thereby causing Donald Trump to wish him to die from the COVID virus, as you may recall. But you know, nonetheless, so we don't know what's going to happen with the Klobuchar bill, but that's it. It's at least a good sign that the Democrats are paying attention. And we'll see from now. It's 5 months till Election Day, and we'll see how, we'll over and we'll see how it goes. Voter stripping, we will talk, Andrea is gonna, that's what Andrea is dealing with, Andrea Miller, and she will give us the rundown on what's happening with election protection through the registration rules. And then the Postal Service and the attempt to defund the Postal Service. I will say that the media covering this is now saying pretty much as a matter of fact that this is because he doesn't want the ballots to go out. In other words, it's an assumption now that that's one of the reasons that he wants to kill the Postal Service. So you know, we've come that far. Sorry, I have to send an email. Okay. And then gerrymandering. This we will not be able to deal with as an issue prior to this election, but gerrymandering is in the news today, as a matter of fact. You know, the cure for gerrymandering, and there are cures for all this. Bob is calling me. Bob, we're on the call now. Okay. So the cure for gerrymandering was established, as we've mentioned, in California in the mid 2000s. California was totally gerrymandered by the Democrats. And so there was a grassroots movement to establish a nonpartisan commission. We don't want bipartisan commissions. We want nonpartisan commissions. So there are 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 4 independents, 4 non-affiliated people, or 5 each, I don't remember what the exact number is, on a commission in California. It was passed by referendum for the state assembly, and then in a second referendum 2 years later, it was passed for the congressional districts. And the key funder was Arnold Schwarzenegger, who paid $3 million of his personal money to pass these referenda. So if any of you are working out with Arnold and can hit him up for another $3 million, we want to talk about in 2022 a series of referenda to put in, California style nonpartisan commissions. Now, it's in the news today because the Missouri legislature is putting on the ballot a referendum to reverse the ballot that was passed already in Missouri. In other words, this is a gerrymandered legislature. The voters of the state passed a referendum to de-gerrymander the legislature, and the legislature is now putting on the ballot another referendum to reverse the de-gerrymandering of the legislature. That's what we're up against. So, but in 2022, after this Michigas, hopefully we will have enough oomph to continue with this work and to de-gerrymander the state legislatures. The gerrymandering was done in 2010. If you want to read a book about it, the title can't be spoken on the air. It's RATF.CKED. And it's a brilliant book about how.
And Harvey, this is Jan Van Door. I was in the leadership of getting the Michigan constitutional amendment passed in 2018 to de-gerrymander our state. And I have written a guide to people who want to do this again. Nobody should have to reinvent the wheel. We can get the people involved and effective to do this in those 26 states that have initiative and referendum. So just letting people know we don't have to live with this shit.
Absolutely. Okay, very good. Thank you for that. And congratulations on winning. They're not all the same. They're written in each state. That's the nature of our country. But yes, and it's made a huge difference in California. Very popular. And so I'm sure it'll be very popular in Michigan as well. There's one in Ohio too that's very compromised. But here we have, these guys have no shame. The word is chutzpah. The public passed this referendum. They all passed, by the way. There were similar, they're big margins. We don't lose these, but so what they're going now is they're rewriting it and whatever. Please put up a link to the chat. Okay. All right. So we're going to go to Andrea Miller, but Andrea Miller in a minute. But Mimi Kennedy, I wanted you to tell, if you would, the story, and anybody else has any residual to raise about vote by mail. I know Steve is going to come out with an article in the next day or two about it. And but Mimi, you had a story that you put up in the San Diego meeting that I wanted you to tell if you can. Are you with us, Mimi Kennedy? Hello?
Yes, I'm there. I'm there.
Yeah.
I'm there, Harvey. Okay. I think what you're referring to is the story of how a mail ballot can beat a provisional ballot to the count.
Didn't you talk about how a Republican monitor in the state was harassing vote counters? Was that you or was that someone else?
I think someone else was telling that story. San Diego, I don't know. Mike Fowler, do you know what he's referring to?
Yeah.
Was on that call?
This is a piece of the of vote by mail, and this is, I was thinking about this today, and I think we need to put out a call for 10 million grassroots activists to become election protection monitors. 1 million, everybody asks for 1 million. We need 10 million. And here's the story that prompted that. There was an instance, and this was recounted, I thought it was you, but I guess not, where Republicans went into the actual vote counting situation, sitting next to vote counters, and in this case, persuading vote counters to throw out ballots because the little circle wasn't fully filled in. And this is the kind of stuff that goes on all over the country. And it's not just Republicans. In the primaries, the Democrats do it to people who vote like for Bernie Sanders. So, but the extent of the corruption is so deep that we will need people sitting next to vote counters after the vote by mail situation, who are on their right side are going to have a Republican. They need on the left side someone who is going to, or someone who has a different agenda, even a Democrat. Harvey. We need someone among our group of activists to protect vote counters from being harassed. So it doesn't end with vote by mail. It doesn't end with the ballots coming in to the voting stations. You know, it ends after the vote count is put out and then recounted.
Excuse me, Harvey, but I can't comprehend how the good people who are conducting an absentee vote count board would be even harassed by anyone. These are sequestered boards. You have to be credentialed to get in there, and then you have to stay until 8 o'clock at night. How could they be harassed?
Because they are. We had this in Ohio. I mean, it was.
How is this allowed? It's illegal.
No, it's not illegal. It's illegal. It's as illegal as the Secretary of State says it is.
Well, you're a Secretary of State. Okay.
If the election board, and we had this in Ohio in 2004, if the election board allows regulators or whatever, there was a word for them, I can't remember, maybe Bob, you remember, in 2004, you'll love this, challengers. In 2004, challengers, just like we had blockers this year. In 2004, the Secretary of State, who also happened to be the chair of the Bush-Cheney Re-Election Commission, Ken Blackwell, allowed challengers to go into the polling stations and to harass people who are conducting the elections.
Well, then there's something really wrong with Ohio law, because challengers in my state are not allowed to talk to anybody but the precinct chair. And then they have to sit down and shut up. There's something really wrong going on in your state.
That happened also in Wisconsin when in that recall for the judge election. They had people, especially in Milwaukee, right there at well, this was a recount. It's made slightly different, but still, they were all these men in suits that showed up and just yelled down everybody and everything.
Absolutely. Well, look, that's what happened in Florida 2000.
Yep.
The foundational event. That's why Kavanaugh is on the Supreme Court. Kavanaugh was the lawyer for the blockers who came in and harassed the voters and the vote counters. I'm sorry, the vote.
I'd like a chance to speak.
In Florida, yes, Emily.
So recruiting and motivating and mobilizing the country and training the country to protect the election, including monitoring, is why scrutineers.org exists. So I see that Kenny is asking, how can we recruit them, train them, organize them? Come check out scrutineers.org. I'm happy to talk with you. You can reach me through our website. But we also have the situation where it's going to be very hard in terms of monitoring post-election processes this year to get permission to be inside those offices because of fear of the coronavirus. And that's something that we're going to need to address. So, I mean, you throw out these ideas, which are important, about needing to have a movement, but simply like saying that and moving on doesn't make it happen. And if you hear frustration in my voice, it's because the way that these calls are going, I feel like there's not room to hear the people who are on the call, who have a whole bunch of different areas of expertise, speak to what it is that we know and what it is that we're doing and what help we need from each other. And I
Well,
would really like to see this be a more collaborative effort.
Yes, next week, or if it's on Memorial Day or the week after, we will be doing organizational networking. And everybody from a group like yours and all the other groups are going to have as much time as they need to explain what they're doing. Our purpose in these meetings so far has been to lay out the basic information about the processes. We've done it with vote by mail, and now Andrea is going to take us through registration protection. Next week, or the next call, if it's Monday or Tuesday, we'll discuss that. Anybody with an organization, anybody who knows an organization, who's involved with this. We want to get all organizations involved in this represented on the call, and we want to establish a database of all organizations working on election protection to where people can go. We're in the process right now of setting up a database of all articles and documents that are posted on election protection. And that will be at freepress.org and at a website that Paul Zeitz is setting up. So we'll have redundancy. If you want to see the latest articles, you can go to freepress.org. You can go to what Paul sets up. And then the second piece of it, we will have a section for the listing of all organizations working on election protection. And Emily, next week we're going to do exactly what you asked. Anybody with an organization?
That's actually not exactly what I asked.
All right, what is it?
Having people just say what they're doing, it's important that we know what each other is doing, but I think there needs to be room for some discussion.
Yes.
And if that's not what these calls are for, it's fine. But like, I'm, you know, you've said that there's no organization, there's no website. This is just, you know, we're just here to do these calls. And many of us are working really hard in organizations. And like, so my question is kind of, I don't exactly know how to say this. I'm sorry. I wasn't expecting to say this.
I want you to write it in the chat. Because we need to proceed.
Okay. I would like there to be more opportunity for participation of the people on the call. Let's just say
Okay, we're going to do that. Let's get through the information. We'll see what kind of time we have at the end of this call. If it doesn't happen this time, it'll happen next week. Your organization and all the other organizations should have plenty of time. And we're doing these conversations are going to continue through the election. We're going through the duration here. There'll be plenty of time. The point of these initial calls is to lay down the basic information, okay? And then you and all other organizations working are certainly invited to speak at the end of this call, but definitely next week and as we proceed. There's plenty of time. Okay, Emily?
Yeah.
Mimi?
Thank you.
Oh, you're muted, Mimi.
Tisa has her hand up. I'm seeing it. I'm worried you don't. Tisa Rodriguez has her hand up.
Okay, Tisa?
So I just have one request for next time, not for today, for next time, because that feels like where it naturally fits. I am able to appoint people in some of those positions. The problem I have is most of my volunteers are immunocompromised, so they can't volunteer. I need to figure out how to find people who are not in high risk groups, who are not immunocompromised, who are willing to go in and do some of these roles. That's my number one problem, because I can kind of bully my way in, because our registrar of voters has been under federal investigation for years. So they're a little afraid. And I suspect that that's a problem a lot of people are having. So I would like to have a discussion about that next time.
Absolutely. And all issues are on the table, all organizations, all individuals. We just need to get through with the voter registration so we know what we're dealing with, and then it's wide open. Okay, Emily? And then anyone else want to speak before we turn it over to Andrea Miller?
I just want to know what state Tisa's in.
Tisa, you're in California.
I'm in Riverside County, California.
Thank you.
And I'll throw in also one really serious agenda item is to establish 2 statewide coordinators in each state. So we have gender balance and backup, and to those people will coordinate getting people in every county. So it will not be the function of this call to organize a national organization. What we want is everybody to be designated, 2 people at least in each state, to get people in each county, so that we have a network. And then in each county, we need people in the face or on the board of every election official that there is. Does that make sense? So there we go. So Emily, yes, we're going to open it up once we get all the information on the table. Okay, Andrea Miller. Is we ready to go with Andrea? Anybody else? Okay, Andrea Miller, please tell us what your organization is and how you're dealing with the question of voter registration.
Paul, go ahead and put up my slide deck, please. We not only do voter registration, we do GOTV as well, and there's our organization. Our organization is Center for Common Ground, and the main campaign that we are running right now is called Reclaim Our Vote. Next slide. All the election work we do is nonpartisan 501c3 work, in that we are not working for political parties or for candidates. We are working to empower underrepresented voters. Now, until this year, we defined underrepresented voters as generally being community of color voters, African American, Native American, Hispanic, and Asian. We are now looking at also adding 18 to 24-year-olds regardless of race, because when we look at who's elected, they are the most underrepresented group in history. Now, Reclaim Our Voters, Center for Common Ground, we have 2 main campaigns: Reclaim Our Vote, Let Me Vote, Count My Vote. And we are also a technology company. I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology company later, and I want to make sure I have room for Q&A. So I am going to talk kind of fast. I hope you can listen fast. Paul, next slide. Now, here's the state of voting in the US right now. There are 245 million age-eligible voters. 48 million of them are inactive and or unregistered. In most states, voters that have an inactive voter status are going to be able to vote, but they are going to be challenged for more ID. There are 16.6 million community of color voters who are inactive or unregistered going into the 2020 elections. So in other words, as fast as we are bringing people in the door with voter registration, they are going out the other end of the door with voter suppression. Paul, next slide, please. Now, we work predominantly in southern states. We work in states that have a very large community of color population. Normally, the state has 20% or more community of color voting population. So we are not looking at population. We're not counting children. We are looking at voters, people who should be able to vote. So we are working in 2020 in Texas, Alabama, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and the great state of Mississippi, where up until a few years ago, these were states where generally you didn't find a lot of organizations wanting to seriously work and invest in those states. Next slide. Now, when I talk about a voter suppression state, meaning we are keeping people from walking in the door, this is normally what we expect to see in voter suppression states. Number one, you will be deregistered or kicked off the voting rolls for not voting. They generally have strict photo ID requirements. They have no same-day registration. They have no automatic voter registration. And there is still old-fashioned 1950s style voter intimidation at the polls. And until last year, Virginia resembled these states. Next slide. Now, let's take a look at some numbers, shall we? Now, in the great state of Texas, there are currently, if the election were held tomorrow, 14,792,662 people who would be able to vote. And when you look at the percentage of community of color, you can see that Texas right now is at 40%. By 2024, due to the birth rate among Hispanic voters and the declining birth rate among white voters, we expect that Texas will be literally at the threshold of being a majority minority state. Right now, Texas has 4.6 million deregistered voters. And when I say deregistered, I mean these folks used to be registered, and now, courtesy of either their state board of elections or their county registrar, they are no longer registered. So one of the things that we do is we work to get that 4.6 million people back on the rolls. And one of the biggest problems is most of these people have no idea that they no longer have the ability to vote. Next slide, please. The great state of North Carolina. It's smaller than Texas, but when you look at the number of deregistered voters, we went from 4.6 million to 1.7 million. So in 2 states, we're talking about 6 million people who, if the election were held tomorrow and wanted to vote, would not be able to cast a ballot because they are deregistered. So the numbers are staggering. So again, remember I said we're at about 48 million. We've looked at 2 states and we're already at 6 million. There's 48 states. So you can see that the state of voting, or the ability to vote in the US, is very bad indeed. Next slide. Alabama, we did a lot of work in Alabama in 2017. And what we discovered, this time I'm going to talk about a different area of the slide because we focus on community of color voters. Now, the numbers that are on these slides, these are people who currently have the ability to vote. So these folks can vote. What we've discovered when we look at elections is many people who can vote no longer vote. And when people stop voting in voter suppression states, if they miss anywhere from 3 federal elections or up to 8, if you're in a reasonably progressive state like Virginia, you may find yourself being dropped off the voter rolls for not voting. So we have really good numbers. So when we're fighting voter suppression, we have to fight, number 1, getting people back on the rolls, and number 2, people that are on the rolls, getting them to vote so that they stay there. Next slide, please. Arizona is also one of our states. And again, in Arizona, our largest population of community of color voters are our Hispanic voters. So because we work in Texas and we work in Arizona, and a very large population is Hispanic, we had to be prepared to have multilingual speakers who write our postcards and also who man our phone banks. Next slide. And then finally, the great state of Mississippi, which is where my family hails from. What's interesting about Mississippi is when I was generating the numbers for this presentation, the number of total voters and the number of community of color voters has dropped more than 20% since 2019. And so I'm going to be very interested in finding out what on earth is going on in Mississippi. Where did the Mississippi voters go? And those numbers that I have on the top of the screen, let's be real, those numbers are the number of electoral votes that each one of these states have. The 6 states that I have shown you all have the US Senate race in 2020. And all these states represent new electoral votes. So all these states are really going to be targeted because of the high community of color population and the number of electoral votes that they represent. Texas especially, because they are 38 of the 39 electoral votes that are needed. New slide, or next slide. And then Georgia. Georgia is a very, very interesting state. Georgia is in the news a lot, especially with its antics over vote by mail. Now, according to this slide, Georgia has 6.7 million people who currently have the ability to vote. There's a secret number that most people don't know about who use NGP Van, which is what I use to access the voter file and pull list of voters. And that is that when voters have been on the unregistered list for about 2 years, they ultimately get completely removed from, quote, the active voter file, and they truly are purged. There are a couple of vendors who hang on to those purged voters. Georgia actually has 3.7 million purged voters who have been removed from the voter file. So while we may be working on the 1.5 million deregistered voters, there's another 3.7 million that are actually out there. Next slide. Now, what we do to reach voters is we call them on the phone, otherwise known as phone banking. And so all the states that I mentioned, we currently have phone banks where we are calling those states. Georgia has their primary coming up on June 9th. Next slide, please. We also, I'll do election news. We currently are working on a project to send 102,000 postcards to rural voters, encouraging them to vote by mail. So we announced this project on Thursday, and we have given out 74,000 addresses so far. So people are writing postcards. And one of the reasons we do use postcards is we find that in rural counties, generally, we don't have good phone numbers. So while we do have phone banks and we attempt to reach people that way, our addresses are normally good. So we send postcards. And if people have been following what's going on in Texas, the Texas Attorney General has refused to allow COVID-19 as a valid vote by mail excuse. A number of our volunteers have spent time visiting with the various county registrars who have very quietly explained that while if someone uses COVID-19 as an excuse, they have neither the manpower nor the authority to investigate that excuse. And so they are accepting it and they are sending the absentee ballot. Texas also has extended early voting 5 additional days, which completely and totally blindsided all the county election officials because they're going to need extra staff for those 5 extra days. They're going to need more hand sanitizer and cleaning supplies. So COVID-19 has really changed the way we have to think about elections. And then while I'm talking about Texas and Georgia, our phone bankers are reporting that as we call voters and suggest that they vote by mail, especially the older voters, we are being met with a rather staid resistance with people saying, no, I am going to go early vote. I am going to take my ballot and I am going to drop it somewhere official. I'm not going to just mail it. What we have heard on the ground is that Georgia now has installed cameras at the drop boxes and the drop boxes are at their advanced voting centers to make sure that the individual brings their own ballot. Georgia does not allow you to send your ballot with another person. You are not allowed to send your ballot with a neighbor or a relative. If you early vote, you are expected to bring your ballot yourself. Next slide. These were the counties that we targeted. So we make phone calls, we send postcards. Geofencing is an interesting concept. If you've ever wondered how conservatives are able to rally so many people almost instantly whenever there's any kind of rally about guns, it is because they geofence every gun store in the immediate vicinity so that they can look back on every person that has been in that store for up to 9 months. And when they do that, they can then send targeted ads to those mobile devices that were in the stores. So that's called geofencing. So it's not voting, it is a way of reaching voters very, very quickly when time is very short. So we are building a geofence campaign to tell voters to send in or mail in their vote by mail ballot. And when they're like, no, I don't want to do vote by mail, we give them a phone number that they can text, at which point then we can send them early voting locations and other options. Next slide. So far this year, we've made 99,000 phone calls. This was as of Thursday night. We're currently over 100,000 phone calls. Next slide. That should be our postcards. All right, now, since January 4th, we have sent 1.2 million postcards. From Thursday until yesterday, we gave out 74,000 additional addresses. We anticipate we are going to mail 3.5 million postcards this year. We send voter registration postcards. Phone numbers are bad. We want to let voters know that they need to check their voter registration and make sure it's active. And we're going to use postcards this year for vote by mail, letting people know that vote by mail is an option and how they can apply and how they can track their ballot. And then if they choose to drop it off with early voting, where the early voting locations are. Next slide. And we actually created our entire line of postcards designed for our population of voters. So power to the people, vote for our lives, and vote your power. Next slide. Geofencing, this is an example. We geofenced the Augusta courthouse that's in Richmond County, Georgia, and we found 2,500 devices. Next slide. Isn't it interesting that in the Augusta County Courthouse, there's more poor people that go there than rich people? So if you were ever wondering about that, our justice system, the high income, these would be the attorneys and the judges. The low income, these are the people that are interacting with the criminal justice system. It took roughly 3.5 minutes to generate this information from a geofence of a single building. Next slide. We were a little surprised to see that there were more women that were interacting with the court system than there were men. And then when we look at the age group, we can see not that many young people. We are peaking at the over 40 to 55 range. Next slide. But again, this was a 3 to 4 minute geofence. We're going to be doing a big election summit starting on May 30th, COVID-19 and the 2020 elections. So right now we've got Sister Simone Campbell of Network and Nuns on the Bus, who will be speaking throughout. Cliff Albright is someone that I work with all the time at Black Voters Matter. We've got Vanessa Gonzalez of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, and Bill Spriggs, who's the chief economist at the AFL-CIO. Next slide. And then on, actually that should be Sunday, on Saturday and Sunday, Cheryl and Eiffel will be joining us. Yay, Steve Rosenfeld. Steve is going to be joining us on Sunday. And Dolores Huerta has indicated that she wants to come, but the day before she's doing a big birthday party. So hopefully she won't be too burned out and she'll be able to join us on Sunday. Next slide. And then the last thing that I want to show you is if any of your organizations are interested in texting for the 2020 elections or voter protection or whatever you might need to text for, we have invented a new product this year. Every year we invent a new product. This is our one for this year. It is the 1 penny text. If you've looked at texting options before, you know that Hustle is 10 cents per text. Spoke is about 4 to 5. So our system is 1 penny. And what will be incredible for our system for Georgia, North Carolina, Texas, and Arizona, those states that use voting centers. See under responses where it says your nearest voting center is Calc 1. we have the ability, based on the voters' county and their zip code, to figure out what their nearest voting center is, and we can send that to them in a text. And right now, we are the only texting service that can do that, because that had been invented for me earlier in the year to operate as a voice bot and or a phone bot. So I'm going to say, let's stop the slideshow there. And I would love to entertain any questions that people might have.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Unbelievable, this presentation, Anthony. Really great. Can everybody hear? We're good? I had a quick question. You're working on extending early voting,
Yes,
right?
right.
What about the deadlines for vote counting? Remember that we have a challenge with vote by mail. These states all have deadlines
Right.
when the votes have to be reported, and it's going to be, so I don't have to further, we need to know what the deadlines are for reporting.
Right. Right now, we've got 7,000 volunteers. And so they are on the Reclaim Our Vote side, busy trying to get people in the door. We are looking at and following when the deadline dates are. I know Georgia and Texas are being very firm on their vote by mail deadlines. They're saying, nope, the ballot must be here, not postmarked, but must be here on election day. So Georgia's primary is June 9th. And then Texas has a Democratic Senate runoff. That'll be July 23rd. So normally we don't do primaries. We are doing them this year to see what the boards of elections, the attorney generals, and the secretary of state throw at us, so we can try to address it either with technology or sheer people power if we must.
Fantastic. Emily, you had a question real quick? Emily Levy, no? Ruth
And
Strauss?
Dorothy has a question.
What's that?
Dorothy.
Dorothy, I have Ruth and Dorothy. Who wants to go first? Okay, Dorothy, go ahead. You're on the screen.
Do you have a target number for each battleground state of number of voters you think you need to reach in order to get a Democratic victory?
What we look at is, again, we are a 501c3. We're not really allowed to look at it that way. What we look at is, our goal is to increase voter turnout among community of color voters by 30%. So when we did Alabama, our goal was 30%. We increased turnout 36%.
Wow.
Yes, yes. So what we look at is, voting for me really isn't about Democrat, Republican. It's not about candidates. It's about the numbers. And when I analyze the state, I look at where did the vote end up in the last election. I actually go back to. I look at a presidential and a non-presidential. And then the next thing I look at is, did the community of color voters turn out? And the answer always is, no, they didn't. So that means if I can turn out the community of color voters, make it possible for them to vote, make sure they have the right photo ID, give them a ride to the polls, make sure they know where the polls are, then we now have a chance to add the community of color vote to the normal progressive or Democratic vote, whatever we want to call it. And that should be enough.
Fantastic. Dorothy, did you want to come back? Okay, Ruth Strauss? Ruth Strauss?
Hey, first of all, that was a stunning presentation. Second of all, I'm from Alabama originally, so I'm all stoked because I have a friend who did voter registration back in the day, because some of us are older than others. And
I'm one of
so-
the older ones.
Yeah,
No,
well, you're not as senior as I am. But anyway, you sound like you have it all together, and this may be a naive question. However, have you networked at all with either Greg Palast, who did a lot of work on voter suppression in Georgia specifically, and in Florida during the Bush, Kerry, whatever election. So he really has a storehouse of information. And then the other thing is, I mean, I was absolutely shocked by what happened in Wisconsin. Not so much shocked about what happened at the state level, but what happened at the Supreme Court level was just outrageous. So my question is there anything, and anybody can answer this, is there any percentage to getting the ACLU involved with this? I mean, this is, basic constitutional rights. So that's all I had to say.
Okay, well, in terms of basic constitutional rights, yes, the lawsuits are very, very important because we know, we hope, there will always be another election coming along. And even if we cannot influence the immediate election that we're working on, if we can get a real victory, then that sets us up for future elections. I was a plaintiff in Virginia, demanding that Virginia retain ballot images. I don't know if you remember in 2017, Virginia lost tying control of our state house literally by 1 vote. And again, it was a very bad recount. So yes, the lawsuits are absolutely critical for cleaning up gerrymandering, ungerrymandering districts, and all types of things like that. And yes, I know Greg. Greg and I have been on a number of panels together. I have a lot of the same information that Greg has because I have access to the literal voter file. So yeah.
Great. Perfect.
Thank you, Ruth.
Wonderful, Ruth. Thank you, and thank you, Andrea. Marta, this conversation will be taped. The whole call.
Can I ask a follow-up, please, just for a moment?
Okay, and then Mimi Kennedy had a hand up. So
obviously, very quickly, Andrea, brilliant presentation. To what degree are you networking or working with a very high-profile and very well-funded Fair Fight with Stacey Abrams and so on? I was just wondering because you have a very excellent understanding of on-the-ground information and strategy, and that group has a large number of resources and access to mainstream media and all that. Is there any networking going on with that organization on your side? Their
really, side? And part of it is we prefer to fly very much under the radar because of the vulnerable population that we deal with. So we deal generally with our folks are rural, they're poor, and they're Black, and nobody's paying attention to them. So if we can make it possible to make more of the move into the door and get them that ability to vote, then we're happy to do that. We don't do this for any type of publicity.
No, I didn't mean that. I'm just saying that in terms of your strategy and approach, they have a lot of funds and they're trying to expand the voting franchise.
Yes.
And all that sort of stuff. Anyway, excellent presentation.
Through Cliff at Black Voters Matter, we have done kind of, sort of, I was threatening a lawsuit, they amplified it, and then the Georgia, in Georgia, if you are an inactive voter, in order to become active, all you have to do is call the registrar. We put up phone banks, started calling tens of thousands of voters. The Georgia registrar stopped answering their phones. So through fair fight, we started making noises about how we were collecting data so that we were going to be able to sue the various county boards of elections. And all of a sudden they started answering their phones again.
Fantastic. Mimi Kennedy? Mimi, you had a hand?
I did. Thank you, Andrea. Fantastic. And yes, that's the good use of those well-funded organizations, because they have all the publicity, because it's pay to play in the media, and that's how that goes. I know you're also working with boat riders, correct,
Yes.
Captain Unger? So I just want to say, in general, I'm seeing increasingly there's a two-pronged approach so far. There's the well-funded organizations that are doing awareness and education, and thank God some lawsuits this time.
Yes.
And then there's the solution-oriented organizations, which clearly, Andrea, yours is. I just want to, I mean, I know that. She was executive director of PDA, folks, for a while. Yeah, then we're doing this together. On that text, I didn't remember seeing this, but I am now concerned with the deadlines to expect your mail ballot. Of course, there's no hard and firm deadline. There's only a deadline to get your application in. And then there's a deadline to get your absentee ballot in. But it's after you've applied and you forget and you don't get it, and now you don't have your mail ballot. And as you know, I know that if you go to the polls to vote in person, you're going to have to vote provisional, because they assume you've been issued your mail ballot. They could be lying, or they just don't know how unreliable that process is. Either way, that voter. So is there anything about saying get your mail ballot yet? If not, call, and then there's the registrar's number. Yes. But if you just told me what ends up with the registrar's number, they're not on their phone. They'll say, or if you're lucky to get a human being, they'll go, okay, we'll send you another one, and God knows how long. So the other thing I want to ask, because Steve Rosenfeld has just shown me a spreadsheet that he's begun for the primary upcoming elections about who has some early voting. And if there's early voting, of course, it can mean the weekend before, it can mean 21, it can mean 14 days out. And generally, if it's at vote centers, that means there might be same-day registration. And that means that if you didn't get your mail ballot, right, you can do something.
Same-day registration in North Carolina. Only North Carolina out of the states where we work.
All the other states
in Georgia, they've got a hard registration date.
So no cure except provisional for the unreceived mail ballot. So I go back to it. Do you have text possibility of doing that little extra thing? I don't know how much it costs or what.
Yes, yes. Now, what we do is we put up a voice bot. So when we geofence those 102,000 voters, yes, it's 102,000 voters. We're going to send them an ad, mail your ballot back, and then we're going to say text, and we give them a number if they have a problem. That text comes back to us. So then our team follows up on behalf of the voter. We work with the voter. The voter might get distracted and forget. We are not going to forget.
So you're collecting data on unreceived mail ballots?
Yes, yes. Again, I'm always thinking in the event there needs to be a lawsuit, I want to be sitting here with, here are the 110 people in XYZ County that never got their ballot. And in our phone banking, that is one of the questions. Have you received your absentee ballot yet? And people know it was never received, or yes, I got it. And then that's when we ask, how do you plan to vote?
Fantastic. More questions. I have an annoying...
I've had my hand up for about half an hour.
Oh, you have? Okay,
yes.
So go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, Dan.
Hi, Andrea. In 2006, Karl Rove thought he was going to remove 1,000,001 voters from the Michigan election rolls. And we caught him at it. I will tell that, we have that story in a publication, and I'm so proud of the activists who stopped that. But that was a clear violation of the National Voter Registration Act, which requires that even if you get mail back or someone might be dead, unless you can verify all of that from a communication by that voter or a return piece of mail, you can't take them off the rolls for 2 years and 2 general elections, which means that almost every state, if they're following the NVRA, should have at least 20% of their voting rolls inflated by people who are hanging out there waiting to be distributed. So what I want to know is, why aren't we enforcing this law? Apparently, we're not enforcing this law. States are just purging people right and left. How can we enforce this law, which is a major tool? It helped us in Michigan. We saved 1 million voters from being purged by Karl Rove.
What the states claim, and the reason it's been held up by, it has been accepted by the courts, is voter file maintenance. So whether you are purged through something like interstate cross-check, or you are voter file maintenance off the road for not voting, the end result is the same. You are not going to be able to cast a regular ballot. What I watch happen every year, because I have all 50 states on the national voter file, is there are 4 classifications of voters in most states. There is active, held the election tomorrow, you can walk in, you can vote. There is inactive, which means different things in different states. In Georgia, make a call, make me active, now I'm active. In Virginia, they tell you to re-register. It's all over the place. Then there is unregistered and there is applicant, meaning I am in the process of registering to vote. In many states, there will be a point where my inactive voters number will rise and be in the 100,000s. And then one day I will log in and my inactive voter number will be 0. And all those voters will have moved over to unregistered. And then normally in another year, those numbers drop and those voters get moved to dropped, where unless I have access to State Voices or America Votes, which I do, I can no longer find those voters in an electronic file. That is part of the data that Greg really worked to get for Georgia, that 3.7 million names. And again, remember, when we lost that 7.2 million voters on interstate cross-check, when we debunked the interstate cross-check as a pile of hooey, those voters never got put back on the rolls.
Jesus. That's staggering.
Yeah, can I,
Welcome to America.
Who's that?
can I speak?
Who?
Yeah, Steve Kaiser. I got my hand up.
Okay, well, we got
Real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, I think over the Wisconsin flag, Donald Trump lamented if this comes in that the Republicans won't win another election. So this seems to be a very important part of their strategy. So I'm wondering, is any sort of inroads being made to stop this whole process and wiping 7 people off of the voter rolls? Isn't this an affront to the 14th Amendment, for one thing, that they granted people the right to vote? I mean, I have the image that this is like a rowboat that you're constantly bailing out.
You're bailing
as you're
every
sinking.
day.
So is there any sort of strategy in place or any sort of policy to attack this and end this in some big way?
I want to throw in, Andrew, before you answer, I want to throw in one talking point real quick. Trump has made the claim that if voting by mail happens, there'll be no more Republicans elected. The very first vote by mail election that happened after he said that was run by a Republican in California. Katie Hill's seat, which she resigned, has gone to a Republican. I just got to throw that in. Okay, go ahead, Andrea.
Okay.
Oh, I was going to say, I have seen federal omnibus bills that address that very thing. And then Representative Mark Pokeman is introducing a bill that would truly make voting a right. Remember, voting in America was never a right. It was a privilege that was gradually extended through piecemeal constitutional amendments. So what many of us currently enjoy is an ability to vote, but not a right, because states control the mechanism and the means and much of the format by which we vote. So until we come up with a solid rule and we say, if you are an American citizen, however we end up defining that one, you have the right to vote. We will not remove, and that means you have the right to not vote. If there are no candidates you like and you don't want to go vote for yourself, you can keep your ass home and say, I'm not going to vote. And because I have chosen not to vote 8 times, 9 times, 10 times, you can't dump me off the rolls just because I haven't voted. And most people in America don't know that. They register to vote and they think they're going to be registered forever. That is so not true. If you don't exercise your ability to vote, you will lose it, because the majority of people getting deregistered are over the age of 40. That means they have been on the voter rolls for enough elections to have missed the prerequisite number of elections and then get kicked off the rolls. I don't have a voter roll problem with 18 to 24-year-olds. They're the most registered generation in the history of America. They just don't vote.
What's the prerequisite number of elections to miss that you get kicked off? Is it 3 elections, 3 major elections? Or?
It varies wildly from state to state. Now in Virginia, it is 8 federal elections. Virginia has an election every year. So we only count federal elections. That's all that counts against. You didn't vote, you're gonna go on the, you know.
But not voting is not a legitimate legal reason to remove someone. That's the whole thing.
Well, that's the question. What have the courts said about this? Has there been federal litigation?
Yes.
Definitive, and what's happened? What's the outcome? Oh, Bob jumping in? Well, I mean, what is the outcome? What have the courts ruled on removing people who haven't voted?
The plain language of the law is that you have to be allowed to stay on the rolls for 2 years and 2 general federal elections before you can be removed, and you have to go through the notification process. Not voting is nowhere mentioned in the National Voter Registration Act.
Okay. Any more? Andrea, you're just unbelievable, and I hope that the other groups that present are on your level. So we're now at 3:15. These meetings just fly by. And I hope you'll continue to come with us. I need a quick consensus here. Paul was pointing out next Monday is Memorial Day. Shall we do the call on Monday or on Tuesday? I'm good with Tuesday. Maybe people should have a day off. Is there a strong objection to moving next week's meeting from Monday to Tuesday? I don't want to take a week off. We got too much to do. All right, we good with Tuesday? All right, the Monday meeting, the Monday 5 o'clock meeting will be next Tuesday. After that, it'll revert to Monday. The second question, will everybody please send me the names and contacts for organizations that you think should have time to present like Andrea has presented? And that will present, and we will have dialogue, Emily, as you request, and there will be questions. We have covered, to this point in time, vote by mail. If there's anybody else that wants to say anything about vote by mail, email me, please. I will put out a document. Then we'll do the same with voter registration. And Andrea, that'll be basically based on your materials. If you have an organization and you think should be represented on these calls, email me. We will approach Stacey Abrams' group, and I want Alan Minsky on with Mimi from PDA, and whatever organizations that you think that will be worthwhile to present, let me know and I will schedule them in, and we will leave time for dialogue as we've had now. The other thing we need to do, one of the other things, we need two people for gender balance, 2 people in each state to be the coordinators to get state organizations in place so that we have a network of people in each county. So we need 2 people to be the go-to people in each state, and then they will build the networks to have people in each county. We've already had dialogue about this in North Carolina, and we have we've lined up some people there. Bob has volunteered to be one of the 2 coordinators in Ohio. Joel is one of the 2 coordinators in North Carolina, and John Brakey has come forward to be one of the 2 coordinators in Arizona. So we need nominations. I have nominated Rennie Cushing. He doesn't know about it in New Hampshire. I hope he's available. So again, we need gender balance. We need 2 people in each state. We have less than 6 months to do this. Now, every day, Dorothy Reich has sent me some articles, and all these articles, by the way, will be posted at freepress.org and with Paul Zeitz, so that you can be updated every day on what's newly posted in the media. And we're also going to have a portal for the listing of all the organizations. So you can get in touch with Andrea and whoever else. Okay, so those 2 things will be taken care of. We are also talking, I raised the issue with this with Paul. We will do a national webinar at some point on Facebook. I'm avoiding Facebook now, or we are, because this is a great group. We have more people on this call than we did when we started. With 61 people on the call, we started with like 50 or so. So that's a good sign. And we were going to keep it process and fact-oriented as much as we possibly can. If any of you want to volunteer to take over and be the coordinator, at least for the time being, in a state, please. I mean, we're open to all 50 states. We've listed, the 3 tiers of 6 states each, which are the most important. We definitely want coverage there. The other thing I've toyed with is calling for 10 million volunteers. I mean, Andrea, how many volunteers could your organization actually handle and make good use of?
20,000. We've already figured that out. We get
20,000
a day. Yeah, we could use 20,000 volunteers.
And how many do you have? How many do you have?
7,000.
Fantastic. Well, that's great. Also, so that's what we need goals organizationally and statewide of how many people we need. I would like to put out a call for 10 million volunteers. I mean, when I reread the story, Bob and I experienced this in Ohio 2004. We had people jumping in, but I mean, they just showed up and bullied their way into the polling stations. The only way you can get around that, you can't complain and say, oh, these guys with suits are here intimidating people. You have to have people on the other side who probably aren't wearing suits saying, hey, you guys with suits, I'm here too, and we're going to neutralize you. And it's going to happen in the vote count as well. Bob, did you want to say anything about that? About what we faced in Ohio and how we're going to deal with it? I assume you saw this in El Salvador. In El Salvador, I'm sure the guys with suits also.
Now, El Salvador was far more civil when I observed those elections. But yeah, a lot of these were young Republican and variations. The mighty Texas Strike Force was created by Karl Rove. And what they do is scour state laws. And they found one in Ohio that said you could individually go to the poll and challenge anyone. There's been subsequent lawsuits that have limited that, saying that you actually have to have some evidence because it was incredibly nasty and there were actual fist fights. So, but we can expect they're going to do it again, find new laws, etc.
So we have to be on top of that. The point is not to complain that these guys are showing up with suits and guns, which they probably will this year, but that we have people there who are going to be nonviolent, but nonetheless they'll be there.
Harvey, we need to know state election code. That's what I've been wading through. And you can search them by name, you know, observation or at the polls. We need to be armed. We can't just ask for a lot of people to go and show up. We need people who are willing to look at the state code, and Steve Rosenfeld and I and some others are working on trying to get stuff around that. But we need to be armed nonviolently with the law. And
Exactly.
knowledge of the law, texted right out so we can show we know what we're doing. That's the key there.
Right. Andrea, can you provide us with coordinators for each state that this kind of information can be gotten to? I'm sure your organization has them, and we will work to
We
share the
currently have 27 state coordinators, so we'll need to talk about what we want them to do. And because we work with national faith partners, they are ideal to go in and talk to state boards of elections. Are you really going to act crazy with faith leaders that are sitting there very nicely in their little church clothes?
Well, and also how many people can join these boards of election? I mean, it's not just enough. It's not just going in and talking to these people. You know, there's a huge void, I'm sure. In many places, they would probably welcome additional workers. And if these additional workers are armed, as Mimi says, with the information that we need, that makes a huge difference. I mean, this is an information is the key weapon here. And I will say that it's gratifying after all these years. I mean, Bob and I started in 2004, Greg and the black box voting started in 2000, to finally see the major media reporting on this. I mean, the articles in the New York Times, they reek of fear, frankly, and we're getting finally major coverage of what could happen to this election. I don't think the danger is that Trump would call off the election. I think that the danger is that by subverting the Postal Service and by doing other things to vote by mail and et cetera, that the election would be pre-subverted. Let's put it that way. And so the function of calls like these is to make sure the information is out there. Mark Collins from BuzzFlash.
Yes, the articles I ran across, and I'm going to post tomorrow on BuzzFlash, answers this question that just came up maybe 5 minutes ago about Republicans providing voting places. And the article is entitled "Freed by Court Ruling, Republicans Step Up Efforts to Patrol Polling Places." And it refers to a 2018 federal ruling that once again restores the rights to do, as was spoken of in Ohio, and also I think Rehnquist did this for Barry Goldwater, which is to patrol and intimidate people in the voting place. So I would suggest people read the article. It's a lengthy one, quite informative.
Yes, and BuzzFlash has been great about posting things like this. I also posted an article today at Reader Supported News about what happened in 1918 to 20 when the pandemic time happened, and the parallels between this year's 2020 pandemic and the 1918 one and their effects on the political system. And we'll put that article along with Mark, the one you're going to post, into the general free press repository, which Bob Fitrakis is in charge of, and Paul Zeitz will do it. We'll have duplication here.
Harvey, I have the URL is in the chat. It's
okay,
at 5.
Great. Wonderful. And we'll put that in the listing. So again, we will do at some point soon. Joel Siegel, you're on the phone. We will, with the COVID-19 emergency bigger group, we'll do a webinar, finally open it up to Facebook somewhere down the line. And then I also want to do, I want to have a webinar on Michael Moore's movie and emphasize, I will deal with the environmental issues, but I want to emphasize the need to, the role that voting plays in protecting the environment. That movie has generated a lot of interest. They had 6 million views. It has some tremendous flaws, and I want to do a webinar tied to this group that posts the deals with the environmental impacts of that movie, but also emphasizes the dimension on voting rights. Okay, Joel Siegel, did you want to jump in? Are you with us? And tie us into the national group that you're working with? I think Joel is not with us. Okay, so we have 4 more minutes. Emily or anyone else, did anyone want to say something real quick? We'll meet again 5 p.m. on Tuesday, next Tuesday. And again, please send me organizations that you think can present. I had originally had this view that everybody would get 5 minutes, but Andrea, you filled a whole hour with incredible stuff. And we want to make sure that other organizations who may be working that way also can have their time to present. Okay, there's anyone else? Kenny Bruno has said he doesn't want to tie in the POTH movie, very divisive, toxic conversation in the climate community. I agree with that. And on the other hand, if we can use it to promote people, at least a few, and to jump in on the voter issue. I'll quote here. I used to speak a lot on the road, and one of the guys I spoke with was Jeremy Rifkin, and we were talking about how once he didn't fly, and once he rode the train from Washington, D.C. to Denver and spoke to 2 people. And I told him I once flew from Miami to Duluth, spoke to 5 people. And he said, well, yeah, you got to, but you still got to give the whole speech because one of them might be a Gandhi. And I was later told that came from a book by Bertrand Russell. Bertrand Russell called a huge rally, or what he thought was going to be a huge rally for peace in Trafalgar Square. And 1 person showed up, but it was Gandhi. so that's what we're aiming for here. Everybody is a potential Gandhi. We have 2 minutes. Anybody want to jump in? Or
I don't think Trump can cancel the election, fortunately.
No, this is how he cancels the election.
Well, I mean, he undermines it, that's right, but he can't flat out cancel it.
No, he can't.
Well,
I don't think.
If he were to cancel the election, his term would be over. So the scholars say that he would be out of office. Pence would be out of office. Nancy Pelosi would be out of office. And they actually said that Patrick Leahy would be next in line to be president because it would have to be a senator because all the Congress.
Okay, well then fill me in then. How does the BMD fit into broader vote suppression and also where we headed on your take on it?
I'd like to encourage everyone who has not watched Kill Chain is free right now until the end of the month.
Therapy on land and nothing.
Oh,
in the pool, I can work 1 full hour.
I think we're being hacked.
Mute everyone.
And I mean, I work out.
Myself. Hi, everybody. We're back. Jan Van Door,
What
real
movie
quick.
was that?
What's the movie?
Kill Chain.
Kill Chain.
Kill Chain.
Okay.
What? Spell
Kill
it.
Chain. It's Russ Michaels, the same producer who did Hacking Democracy, and it's available on YouTube outside of the paywall for HBO. They're giving this free all month until the end of May.
Can you spell it? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
It's in the chat. KILLCHINE.
Kill Chain.
No,
Okay.
AIN.
Okay, you guys, we're at 3:30. We're right on time. Next week, it's Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you, Paul Strauss. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, everybody. Kenny, we'll be glad to see you in 8 days. And I hope that our next presenters are as good as Andrea Miller was. That was spectacular. Again, send me suggested organizations to present, and we'll see you in 8 days. No nukes and no more stolen elections, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.